As you enter high school and as you undertake different courses, I hope you will remember this truth, the truth of your absolute value as a human life. Use this truth as your rule in measuring the education offered to you. Let me urge you to examine every subject given to you for study and every assignment demanded of you. Ask this question again and again and again. How does this study, how does this subject relate to the truth of my life? I hope you will insist that your studies shall become life studies, Black studies, urban studies, environmental studies. The American evidence of contempt for our Afro American lives can easily be seen when you realize that we who are Black and we who live in urban centers of the country and we who poison ourselves simply by breathing the air, and we who swallow soap and worms, and worse than that, when we drink a glass of water. We cannot come into any classroom and learn what we need to know. Welcome to Learning Liberation, the Ethnic Studies Podcast. I'm your co-host, J.R. Adembwanga. Those words were said by poet, educator, and activist June Jordan to graduating eighth graders in 1970 in Brooklyn, New York. Jordan is one of the many ancestors who informed the work of our Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies and is a perfect way to start this episode on Black Lives Matter at School. This episode features two teachers, Kailee Lewis and Christina Mitchell, who speak with Chanel Hurt of Black Lives Matter at School about the curriculum and framework for the Black Studies courses they teach in my hometown, Stockton, California. Black Studies is one of the four core areas developed by the originators of ethnic studies, and this episode provides educators, administrators, and organizers with some of the details of how such a class comes to fruition at a school district level. Established in 2017, the National Black Lives Matter at School is an organization struggling for liberation and racial justice in education for Black youth, educators, and all youth of color. The organization works to address racial justice in education by promoting restorative justice, advocating for mental health support, increasing Black teaching staff, ending police presence in schools, and mandating Black history and ethnic studies across the country. Originally from Stockton, California, Christina Mitchell earned a BA from Claremont McKenna College and an MA from San Francisco State University. For over 10 years, she taught several high school courses, including Spanish, world history, and African American studies in the Bay Area before moving back to her hometown. Christina has served as a mentor for the Ethnic Studies Education Pathway Project, curricular lead for the California Regional Ethnic Studies Collaborative, and member of the Ethnic Studies Steering Committee for Stockton Unified School District. She is currently teaching ethnic studies and piloting a new Black and African American Studies course in Stockton. Kailee Lewis grew up in Southwest Michigan, graduated from Central Michigan University, and moved to California with her family, where she taught for nearly a decade. She worked on the ethnic studies team in Stockton for almost half of that time, where she taught and built community responsive and culturally relevant curriculum for students in partnership with community members all around the Stockton area. She has helped with the curriculum development of 4 classes and taught the first Black and African American Studies courses on our campus in January 2023. In mid-2024, she and her family returned back to Michigan to bring her perspective of the transformative work of ethnic studies to her Midwest communities. Chanel Hurt is a steering committee member and former administrative staff of National Black Lives Matter at School. She began volunteering with BLM at school after learning about the Week of Action during her term as a union board member for her local chapter in Virginia. Chanel has taught middle and high school orchestra, second grade, and English as a foreign language for all ages from 0 to 100. Currently, they focus more energy into creating self-publications, learning Spanish, and practicing community and organizational safety. Our website and the National Black Lives Matter at School website has a wealth of resources, including resources on teaching for Black lives, DC area educators for social justice BLM at school resources, a Seattle Public School BLM at School Resource Guide, a Rochester BLM at School Resource Toolkit, a general BLM at School Resource Toolkit, and more information on how you can organize or participate in the annual Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action every February.
Well, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it, Kailee and Christina. Um, I'm going to ask you all to give an introduction, your name, your pronouns, your role, as well as your relationship to each other. And if you all can provide a little framework of how you got here and how the both of you are kind of in this place now, that would be great to give us an introduction into the podcast.
So my name is Kailee Lewis, and my pronouns are she, her. Currently, I am a teacher of ethnic studies and a couple of other things, including Black studies at Chavez High School in Stockton. Originally, I am from Michigan. I grew up in Michigan and moved to California in about 2016 to pursue teaching. And I've been here ever since. I've been in a couple of different places. I've worked in a charter before coming to the school that I'm at currently. And I'm just honestly really excited to be teaching this class and to be teaching with Christina, who I also met here in Stockton by joining the Ethnic Studies department.
My name is Christina Mitchell. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a teacher at Edison High School in Stockton, California. I'm actually from Stockton, born and raised. I went to a different high school though. I left after high school to study. I went to school in Southern California, ended up back in the Bay Area. I actually taught Black Studies at Berkeley High for a couple years. Took a little break from teaching, and then I moved back to my hometown and back to the classroom. And I'm really excited to be a part of the ethnic studies department and kind of creating this class with the Black Studies class with Kailee.
Thank you. I think it's great that we have, like, Kailee, you're from the Midwest, so you're not, a native to California. And then Christina, you're born and raised in Stockton. So I appreciate the well-roundedness that you all can offer to this discussion. So if you can give the audience a little background on the logistics of this Black Studies class that you're going to be teaching in Stockton. I know folks are curious to know if it's a requirement or if it's an elective, who is the class open to, who can take it, and like what is the main curriculum students are being taught, and like what topics do you think benefit students and why?
At my school, Black Studies is an elective, although in the district, students can get A credit, which is social science credit. In my school, it is an elective though. Kailee and I are creating the curriculum as we speak. And we're making these decisions weekly about what the curriculum will be taught in the course. But we're in process. But so far, we believe that it's really important to focus on the resistance and the empowerment in African American studies. Just reflecting on my past as a high school student, I actually really hated history. It was my least favorite class in high school because I think it focuses on the oppression and what happened to us. But I think with Kailee and I, we're really focused on not what happened to us, but what we've done over time, the magic and the resilience, and the beauty that that has come about through the course of Black Studies in America.
Yeah, and I think to give a little context to how we got here, I have a few notes because I want to make sure that I hit all of our super important people. So in this iteration of ethnic studies in Stockton, I do believe this is the second iteration. And in this iteration, we started with the Little Manila After School program being started at Edison, where Christina teaches. And they focused on Filipino history. We have a very, very large Filipino population in Stockton, and they recognize the really important history and community in that, and really wanting people to know, wanting students to really know their history. And so it started there, right? We had teachers who were ethnic studies students who were part of community efforts that came back and started this after school program that then grew into the ethnic studies program that started with our intro course that's currently running right now. And then our Mexican American history course came before the class that we have been blessed enough to be able to pilot this next year. And then this is all coming after, right, like the state requirement for ethnic studies. So California has a graduation requirement for ethnic studies that was approved in 2021. And so what comes out of that then is that we have our curriculum at Stockton Unified to teach the introductory course. And so our introductory course introduces all of the ethnic groups that are covered in ethnic studies. And I know we'll get into that in just a second. Just Black studies being a section, right, of that. And so then our plan became to expand and allow for all students to learn deeper about each of the sections. So it starts with Mexican history. Our Black studies course was approved alongside the Native American Indian studies course, and I believe an art and ethnic studies course. And then we are also working on the Filipino studies course to be that'll be the next one to come after Black studies. So it's literally just a step in this big, very large umbrella of work that our team is doing.
Yeah, we're envisioning kind of like a pathway. So students can start with Intro to Ethnic Studies and get an introduction to all of the groups. And then they can take a specialty course later, Mexican American history, Black studies, Native American studies, art and ethnic studies, as well as Filipino studies.
And I think our hope is to, as the program grows, to continually grow opportunities for students to learn about not only themselves, but about each other. Because you asked, like, who can take the course? The course is open to anyone. The course is not a space that is limited, except for in the fact that we only have one teacher at each site offering it. That's the only thing that makes it limited, but anyone can take the course. Typically, in our first years of piloting, we open it to anyone, regardless if they've taken the intro course. But as the program goes, you will need to take the intro course in order to have some of our groundwork in terms of frameworks and understandings and concepts and vocabulary. And then you'll go into the Black Studies course, along with any of the other ones, hopefully, that kids want to take.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing how it grows. But how would you say that students and families inform these opportunities or inform the curriculum and the content that you teach?
I feel like there's a couple of ways we do that. So the first one would be, once we have our fleshed out curriculum that we like, our outline, we take it and we have kind of community presentations with our ethnic studies steering committee. And we have what's called a community collaborative. So we have a group of people in the community that are already on board with ethnic studies. They're already we started meeting during the pandemic. We met last year a little bit. And then this next year, because we have so many classes that are piloting and are being planned, we'll have quite a few more quarterly, if not monthly meetings is the plan, I believe, to be able to really share topics, to be able to share what we are working on, as well as any questions we have for them, and then allowing that conversation to be to just be free and open. And then we also, during the actual class, do a lot of feedback surveys. So we ask students at the end of each lesson what they enjoyed, if they learned what they learned. So it's just as important to us that they're getting the content as it is that they're enjoying being engaged, right? Like, we want them to, even though we have to talk about heavy topics, we want them to find beauty and joy in the spaces, and we want to make sure that the feedback that we're getting reflects that, and if it doesn't, then we can make adjustments as needed. And so I think that's one of the things that has been the most influential in all of the classes before, is like really diving into not only the numerical data of how grades are and who's turning in what, and right, like that teachers are so often doing, but also diving into the data of how students are genuinely feeling about the classroom, not just the content, but the community, the room itself, and all of those things.
Personally, when I taught Black Studies in the past, I think there was a period, I taught it 3 years. And so I saw patterns that started to emerge. I noticed that there would be some students, it would take some time for some students to kind of like unlearn the anti-Blackness, the racism that is like air. We all breathe it every day. So you can't even see it anymore. So when I taught the class, it took some time just to like unlearn that and then kind of fill in the gaps and like add more knowledge to it.
And I feel like we did a really good job, or we're doing a really good job as we're building to try to create that space with the information of I feel like I forgot to say that Christina's past experience and the students that she brings into our meeting spaces. Like, I feel like I hope that you have past students that listen to this, because I really want them to know that you are doing their lessons that they taught you. Like I hear that so much in our conversation, and a lot of the ways that we have designed our curriculum has been based around the brilliance of their understandings of their history, right? Like we talk about, and even in our intro class, we have a reference to kind of like Black history as this roller coaster of ups and downs that I know directly came from her students. So when we think about students impacting the class, I like to call it student legacy. That's what I tell them when they're filling out the surveys. Their legacy is those like light bulb moments that they have. Being able to help build those in for new students is really, really fun, because we know that they were directly from students. I really enjoy that about our conversations in our building.
Yeah, I love that. Student legacy. I'm experiencing that now a little bit. We started our Black Lives Matter at School Summer Freedom School, and people are coming, with different levels of experience. And some have taken a Black history class. Some have maybe not even heard those words uttered in their school system. So yeah, the first week has really been kind of instilling, like, why are we doing Black stuff? Why are we doing this outside of, your traditional schooling? But why are we having this in the first place? Why are we gathering together? What's the importance of Black studies, Black history, not just of the content and the people, but just like as the legacy and the lineage that we carry. And so I want to end this section by kind of asking you all, if you were to leave people with one thing about ethnic studies and Black studies specifically, kind of the relationship with that, what would that be for people? Like, what's one thing they can walk away from here with, take to their own communities, or just, have for themselves as they start to organize around ethnic studies and Black studies in their areas?
Well, I'm relatively new to ethnic studies. I started, off in Black studies, but I think there's a beautiful kind of partnership and correlation. I think ethnic studies is such a great opportunity to learn how to step up and step back, because both are super powerful, right? Step up because when it's specialized, when we're trying to get a course approved, when we need textbook money, like step up. And then step back as in practice being an ally. I think because we can all support each other, we have similar challenges and similar journeys that we're working with. And, as many wise people have said before, we can't be free until all of us are free. So I think ethnic studies is such a beautiful opportunity to practice being an ally, stepping up and stepping back.
So my background is similar to Christina. Most of my studies have been in Black studies, and then ethnic studies is a very new space to me. And I think the thing that I have learned is because of our historical context, right? Like I feel like Black people, we love as much as we hate independent, like being like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be independent. I got it, and I'm gonna do it by myself. And we are so resilient in that way. And I think the thing that I would love for people to take away about Black studies and ethnic studies is that like solidarity is a real thing, and it's scary, and it takes a lot of work and trust and conversation. But the thing I think that I've learned the most from ethnic studies is just how similar we really all are, and just how aligned our histories are, and how intentional it has been that those histories have been misaligned. Like it has truly been an intention. And I don't think that I got that until I started looking at other stories with the same intention that I looked at my own, right? And I think like, and it is scary. Like the idea of solidarity is an extremely terrifying idea, because we've been taught that we can't do it together, that we all, we all get a little snippet, a little sliver of the pie. And I think ethnic studies taught me like, nah, there's enough pie. Like it's the resources that people have been telling us aren't there that are there, I think that's the thing that I've learned the most. And there's so much joy in solidarity. Truthfully, I think that's been the biggest takeaway for me, because I've had students that I've really had to sit with and be like, no, like it's real, like it's not a sham.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like there's pie, there's cake, there's souffle, there's everything at the table. I love it. And learning about the histories and the stories of like, yeah, our lineages, I think makes us or realize that the very real possibility of this work. Like you begin to like connect the mutual connections. Just, I don't know, learning about that is like, wow, this can actually happen. Like now that I'm related to the two of you by another mutual contact, and maybe I'll meet other people that know you, it's like the organizing world is so much smaller. I think, it's a small world. We're very interconnected. So yeah, I love that. And then just I think the practice in being in community and in solidarity is a practice, and we need to be doing that every day. It's something that we have to embody in the values and the principles that have brought us here in the first place. So yeah, thank you for that reminder. We want to hear a little more about how you all organized around Black studies in your community. What were the eases and the challenges you all faced? Since we're organizing around Black studies, how did anti-Blackness show up in your community? How did that affect the Black organizing in your community? We would love to hear more about that.
I'll start with the just kind of like the thing that I think helped us in terms of, I don't want to call it an ease, but I think it helped us to face the challenges, was that when we presented the Black Studies course, we did not present the Black Studies course on its own. I think the other thing that helped us was that this is how I feel like solidarity has worked in our favor since I brought that up. I think that so before the Black Studies course, we had the Mexican American history course approved. And I think starting there, because the majority of our student population is Latino, Latine, I think that was helpful, because if folks see it in their, like at that time, I think the majority of our board was also Latino, like our school board. And so being able to see that class as a reflection of their own history, I think it made it a little bit easier to then take on the idea of other history courses coming, or other courses about ethnic groups coming in. And then putting them together, like I feel like helped, even though we did face some challenges. So the first time we went up for board approval, the classes were not approved. And we went through the board approval process twice. So the first time they were not approved and the second time they were, but again, it was multiple classes together. And then the second time we had, a little more push from our community, that community collaborative that I mentioned before, really leaning on their support. The students, families, parents, other teachers, they definitely showed up to school board meetings and told them the importance of our classes. And I think that the community engagement is like a huge part that I don't necessarily know that a lot of folks think about when they're organizing and trying to rally for new classes. So having that community collaborative before you even go to the board was a super big support.
So, just to clarify the timeline a little bit, like Kailee said before, ethnic studies in our district started as an after-school program with Little Manila, focusing on Filipino American history, and then it transitioned into ethnic studies during the school day. From there, the Mexican American history course was approved, again because of the larger Mexican American community in our area, and then we followed that up by proposing Black Studies, Native American Indian Studies, and Art and Ethnic Studies. Those 3 courses were not approved the first time. They actually didn't even get to the board meeting the first time. There was in our district, there's a lot of turnover in leadership levels. And I would suggest, if anyone else is having challenges in this area, I would suggest clarifying, what are the steps to getting a course like listed on the board agenda. Because we had to do that a few times, just clarify several times because the steps changed. So, and I think during that time, there was also kind of like transition at the board level anyway, as in, superintendent might have changed, board members changed, associate superintendent on that level changed. And so the next year when we went up, we were working with a different group of people. And so I think it's important to figure out what kind of changes are being made and what kind of allies you can have, and also how can our interests overlap. One of the questions that we ask at the end of ethnic studies is, we ask our students, how did this class impact you? Does it make you want to try harder in your other classes? We follow them, and we have a high percentage of ethnic studies students that graduate from high school. And of course, high school graduation is something that everyone wants. So if we can show the things that, how our interests are aligned, then we can hopefully get some more support in the future.
Yeah, it all seems very practical. You all have been well organized. You have the community board. But I think even in the order of which the classes were approved, it seems practical because that was the demographics of the community. And then also, just finding how interests can align for students, for families, for even the school and the city government. It just all seems very practical. So I appreciate that reminder, because sometimes we can forget that when we're not in all the ideas and the theory of how things might happen. We can forget that when versus being on the ground and preparing for those changes, being ready for those changes. There are some things we can't control, but there's a lot I think we can be prepared for. And then as people begin to have these discussions, whether in their families or in their, their unions or their communities, schools, how would you, advise someone to kind of talk and engage in organizing Black studies?
I'm gonna slip a little piece about our curriculum in here that I think is really important that I don't think that we thought about until we started planning. And I think that is talking about any class like this from the place of how have we withstood the test of time, as opposed to how have we not as opposed to in replacement of what has been done to us that we have had to survive. So often our classes focus on telling, at least it feels this way to me, right? They focus on telling the story of resilience, but from the perspective of A, B, C, and D happened to us over and over and over again. And those things are important. I don't want to minimize the importance of knowing the history of really just the turmoil that we have dealt with as a people. And I think we as a broader people of color as well. But I think the thing that helps classes like these be the strongest for students is to root them in the actions that we took to overcome, right? The actions and the things that we did, right? The things that our elders talked about, that our ancestors talked about, the things that they did, not just to counteract, but to really create the community. So instead of focusing on the massacre, right? Note that the massacre happened, talk about the massacre, honor the people, but focus on all of the things that we're building, that were being built, that we can continue, or all of the things that were built after that were beautiful and thriving, and even if only for a short time, right? Like really focusing on the things that get left out of the details. So some of our consistent concepts that we talked about, or that we talk about really wanting to highlight, are the evolution of the Black family, right? Talking about how family structures have changed and shifted and grown stronger for us, as opposed to talking about all of the ways in which the United States or other, entities have tried to decimate or destroy or interrupt that creation, right? Instead of focusing on the negative, focusing on all of the beautiful, I think has been something that, and will continue to be something that makes ethnic studies and Black studies an additional light, right? Like adding even more light to the already very loving and light space that it is, but like really focusing on, again, I know you brought up that word resilience, but really focusing on the resilience as opposed to what we had to withstand, I think has been a really big change of mindset for me in building these classes.
And I would add, I think it's important when organizing to ask questions. I went to BSU and I asked, what would you like to see in the course? And then I think if people have a say, they have more buy-in and they want to support more. We went to college professors that teach in the area. We went to NAACP members, just community members. And I think if we can just ask a lot of questions and really listen and make sure everyone feels seen and heard in the curriculum, you can get a lot more support that way. And I actually did that when, like we said before, the Mexican American History course was the first to get approved, the first specialty course to get approved. And the teacher that piloted that course did something similar. He had meetings with people in the community and I participated. And I suggested that he add something about Gaspar Janga, who was an Afro-Mexican leader. And he did. And now that's in his curriculum every year. And it's really nice to see his students learn about the Afro-Mexican history as well. And so I'm really excited to follow that lead and do the same thing and ask questions of our community so we can make sure that our community is seen and heard in our curriculum.
Yeah, amazing. It's like the manner and the way in which you all organized, and like the way that we want the future to be and the way that we want to treat each other. So I always love having these conversations because it connects the dots for me. It's like when I'm reading a book about abolition, like this is actually that, because this is an alternative to the way that we know things to be. So to see it in practice, yeah, inspiring. And also, his statue in Veracruz is on my list of things to go see in Mexico. So. Because I also learned very late in my life there were Afro-Mexican people. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so what guides you as a radical educator, and what keeps you in your purpose? And also on the flip side, what blocks you in your purpose? I want to hear a little bit about that as well.
What guides me as a radical educator is liberation. I want to be free. I want my students to be free. I want my community to be free. And I think in order for us to be free, we have to actually see the systems of oppression that are affecting us every day. And so I think it's a balance between learning about the systems of oppression, celebrating our humanity, our art, our creativity, our resilience, and kind of having this balance between taking care of ourselves and fighting, taking care of ourselves and fighting.
Thank you so much for the reminder to take care of ourselves, because I'd be working. And I think I think I agree with everything that Christina has said, and I think I will add students. Students are a big guide for me, because so often, especially in our ethnic studies spaces, I feel like a lot of students already have the intrinsic, the gut instinct almost of something's not right here, right? Like the world has not yet gotten to them in that sense. And I think really supporting that fire, really supporting the flame of the next generation for as long as I can. I have a 13-year-old who's getting ready to be a freshman this year. And so I think that I think the other thing for me is I see a lot of students' elders in their faces. I see a lot of the communities that students come from. So in their interactions in their faces. So when I am inspired by students, I know that I'm not the only one. I know that their families at home, even if they're giving them, a hard time, I know that they're inspired and that they're doing things and that they're asking questions. And I think students really inspire me to push for whatever, because they deserve the things that we didn't get, that we can now see that they deserve, right? The thing, I feel like every time I win for a student, 13-year-old me is happy. That's the thing for me as a radical educator, is how am I in that sense taking care of myself, but also really taking care of my students. I see so much of them in us, in all of us as adults. And so they're my driving. And then I have to remember to take care of myself.
Yes, please do. That's a beautiful image, though, to look at a young person's face and see, all the people that they come from that made it possible for them to be standing, or in your classroom, sitting in your classroom. We've talked a lot about resiliency. And can you all leave us with your definition of resiliency? I know people will use the word a lot. And so I would love to hear what that means from you all.
For me, resiliency is just simply never giving up. You can, cry, take a nap, take a break, curl up in a ball. But then when you feel ready, you stand up again. You figure out a different way. You keep trying. I kind of think failure doesn't exist if you just never give up. So that's what resiliency is to me.
Yeah, I think all of the things that Christina has said, and then I think I would add the word that's coming to mind is dynamic, but that's not necessarily the word that I'm thinking of, like the versatility, right? The being able to not just get back up, but like, okay, I'm gonna check that one off, right? That one, that one wasn't it, and then go into the next one on the list, or and then also knowing when to step away from things that are not helpful, right? Knowing when, like, I want this, I feel like so often we want this one thing to work so hard that we want to see it through to the end, but it's not meant to work. And I feel like resiliency is knowing when to step away from something to try a new alternative, right? When to pivot, when to adjust, and to consult people, right? To build that, again, which is solidarity, just reminding folks that it's there, right? But I think that aids in resiliency, being able to have multiple outlets to try.
I will take those words with me today. I know solidarity and resiliency. Yeah, there's a lot of like factors of experimentation in there. I like that. I also appreciate the language you said, like when you feel ready. Sometimes we can feel like we have to be on all the time. But yeah, I like that language. Like when I'm ready, I will come back again, so that I actually can serve, the people that I'm accountable to.
I was taught, like in the very, very beginning of my teaching career, that self-care is an act of revolution. And I forget that often, which is why I say, like, I be forgetting to take care of myself. But that was one of the first quotes that really like hit me. And I feel like that's something that like you have to have in order to be resilient. Like you have to remember that that's just as important as everything else.
All right. Before we get into kind of sharing resources for other educators and for teaching, I want to hear from you all. Yeah, what does it mean for Black lives to matter at school?
So, as we know, unfortunately, Black students are overrepresented in suspensions, overrepresented in special ed, like all the things, right? So I think what it would mean for Black lives to actually matter at school would be for Black students to be seen and heard and have every opportunity to thrive.
I agree. And I would add, when we talk about seen, that they show up in curriculum, that they show up on the whiteboard, that they show up in the handout, that they show up on the walls, right? Like, and as much as they show up in the joy and the rallies and the music at lunch and the cool kids corner and whatever else, like it's not just seeing them walk the halls, it's seeing them on the wall. It's seeing them in the spaces that are academic just as much as they are athletic. And, like I think it's holistically seeing students at school. It's not enough for us to have a seat at the table if we're not in the pamphlet. If we're not, if we're not part of building the menu or the brochure or the thing, like, why are you inviting us to your table when we're not even really invited?
Yeah, thank you. I got chills when you said, not just seeing them in the halls, but on the halls. I thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation a lot. We want to leave folks with some places that they can get resources. And we're also curious as to where you all get your resources that you use in your classroom, that we can also go back and share with our community. So, where do you start?
First and foremost, I think one of the big places to start is the elders. Your community elders. Ethnic studies is rooted in local history, right? It's rooted in the history of your city, the history of your state, the history of the land before it was a city and a state, before it was the United States. And so I would start with the elders that are literally in your community that we often don't think about in academic spaces unless they're there with us. And really valuing though the stories that are untold, we talk about counter narratives in ethnic studies, really valuing not just the academic resources, but the stories of just daily life in your city for Black people, right? To be able to draw those lines. I think that was like the biggest, even though I know sometimes we have a hard time connecting with elders, I think that is one of the most huge pieces of ethnic studies and of Black studies, is knowing like the people who literally stood on the ground before you.
And I would like to add the National Endowment for Humanities. They have summer programs for teachers, and I was able to go to Africatown in Mobile, Alabama, a couple weeks ago to learn about that community. So yes, in addition to focusing on your own community, I think you can apply for some of these projects and get funding to travel to other communities and learn from them as well.
I know I can often forget just how much wealth of information is just like right outside my window. And I also like my window to kind of be all over the place. It's hard for me to say where I'm from because I like to be in different communities and learn. So it's that balance, right? Yeah.
That was one of the new things I think that ethnic studies has taught me, is just how like there's already so many people in your community that are organizing for the purpose of education or the advancement of people. And it's okay when we don't get our things from academic spaces. I feel like as teachers and as educators in school, we're always looking for an academic resource, when in reality, anything can be academic. Like, go make it academic, you know? Don't be afraid to talk to the people and to bring in because like a lot of times those are the things that students want to hear about anyways. They would much rather hear about what's happening around the corner from their house than they would, you know, something that's happening 2,000 miles away.
You can find the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and check out our website at ethnicstudies-coalition.org, where you can find more tools, merch, and information and resources mentioned on this episode and on our podcast in general. We're a growing movement, and if what you heard in this episode inspires you, we invite and highly encourage you to become a CLEAS member and spread the word to your folks. Donations for this podcast are always welcome, needed, and appreciated. You can donate online on our website at ethnicstudies-coalition.org. Learning Liberation, the Ethnic Studies podcast, is produced by members of the podcast team of the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies. Our theme music was produced by Coalition member Sharif. Our podcast art is designed by Coalition core member and podcast co-host me, J.R. Adamwanga. From the front lines in the classroom to the front lines in the streets, sending revolutionary love and solidarity your way.